An excise or excise tax is an inland tax on the sale, or production for sale, of specific goods, or a tax on a good produced for sale, or sold, within a country, or licenses for specific activities. Excises are distinguished from customs duties, which are taxes on importation. Excises are inland taxes, whereas customs duties are border taxes. An excise is considered an indirect tax, meaning that the producer or seller who pays the tax to the government is expected to try to recover or shift the tax by raising the price paid by the buyer. Excises are typically imposed in addition to another indirect tax such as a sales tax or value-added tax. In common terminology, an excise is distinguished from a sales tax or VAT in three ways. An excise typically applies to a narrower range of products. An excise is typically heavier, accounting for a higher fraction of the retail price of the targeted products. And an excise is typically a per-unit tax, costing a specific amount for a volume or unit of the item purchased, whereas a sales tax or VAT is an ad valorem tax and proportional to the price of the good. Typical examples of excise duties are taxes on gasoline and other fuels, and taxes on tobacco and alcohol. Definition: the etymology of the word excise is derived from the Dutch Excises, which is presumed to come from the Latin accensere, meaning simply to tax. Regulatory and legal definitions of excise vary by country. For example, in India, an excise is described as an indirect tax levied and collected on the goods manufactured in India. In the United Kingdom, Revenue and Customs lists alcohol, environmental taxes, gambling, holdings and movements, hydrocarbon oil, money laundering, refunds of duty, revenue traders' records, tobacco duty, and visiting forces as being subject to excise. Some of the listed items are not goods, but rather services. The Australian Taxation Office describes an excise as a tax levied on certain types of goods produced or manufactured in Australia. These include alcohol, tobacco and petroleum and alternative fuels. In Australia, the meaning of excise is not merely academic, but has been the subject of numerous court cases. The High Court of Australia has repeatedly held that a tax can be an excise regardless of whether the taxed goods are of domestic or foreign origin. Most recently, in Harvey, New South Wales, the majority of the court endorsed the view that an excise is an inland tax on a step in production, manufacture, sale or distribution of goods, and took a wide view of the kind of step, which, if subject to a tax, would make the tax an excise. Rationale: in defense of excises on strong drink, Adam Smith wrote, "It has for some time past been the policy of Great Britain to discourage the consumption of spirituous liquors, on account of their supposed tendency to ruin the health and to corrupt the morals of the common people." Samuel Johnson was less flattering in his 1755 dictionary, Excises. N.S. A hateful tax levied upon commodities, and adjudged not by the common judges of property, but wretches hired by those to whom excise is paid. Monies raised through excise may be earmarked for redress of specific social costs commonly associated with the product or service being taxed. Tobacco tax revenues, for example, might be spent on government anti-smoking campaigns. Excise duties or taxes often serve political as well as financial ends. Public safety and health, public morals, environmental protection, and national defense are all rationales for the imposition of an excise. Public safety and health deter individuals from harming their health by abusing substances such as tobacco and alcohol, thus making excise a kind of sumptuary tax, or deter them from engaging in morally objectionable activities such as gambling and prostitution, thus making it a type of vice tax or sin tax. Environmental protection deter individuals or organizations from harming the general environment, including curbing activities which contribute to pollution, or which harm the natural environment. Defense, including taxation directly levied on other countries' militaries and/or governments, such as the UK's taxation on visiting forces. Punitive, many US states impose taxes on illegal drugs, while the UK government imposes excise on money laundering and on visiting forces. These taxes are not considered revenue sources, but rather exist to allow governments greater leverage for punishments and reparations. War reparations are based around the concept of tax evasion, which can be imposed in the event that the perpetrator is caught and tried. Targets of taxation: tobacco, alcohol and gasoline. These are the three main targets of excise taxation in most countries around the world. They are everyday items of mass usage which bring significant revenue for governments. The first two are considered to be legal drugs, which are a cause of many illnesses, which are used by large swathes of the population, with tobacco being widely recognized as addictive. Gasoline, as well as diesel and other fuels, meanwhile, despite being indispensable to modern life, have excise tax imposed on them mainly because they pollute the environment and to raise funds to support the transportation infrastructure. Narcotics: many U.S. states tax illegal drugs. Gambling licenses are subject to excise in many countries today. In 18th century England, and for a brief time in British North America, gambling itself was for a time also subject to taxation, in the form of stamp duty, whereby a revenue stamp had to be placed on the ace of spades and every pack of cards to demonstrate that the duty had been paid. Since stamp duty was originally only meant to be applied to documents, the fact that dice were also subject to stamp duty suggests that its implementation to cards and dice can be viewed as a type of excise duty on gambling. Prostitution has been proposed to bear excise tax in separate bills in the Canadian Parliament, and in the Nevada legislature. Proposed wordings: 5.5 Implementation of an excise tax on prostitution. The brothel is taxed and passed it on. An excise tax is hereby imposed on each patron who uses the prostitution services of a prostitute in the amount of $5 for each calendar day or portion thereof that the patron uses the prostitution services of that prostitute. The reasons given by Canadian MPs entering the bill covered many of the above-mentioned areas, including extra funding for police protection and better health care for the prostitutes. However, so did many of the counter-arguments. Other types: salt, paper and coffee. Excise has been known to be applied to substances which would in today's world seem rather unusual, such as salt, paper, and coffee. In fact, salt was taxed as early as the 2nd century, and as late as the 20th. Many different reasons have been given for the taxation of such substances, but have usually, if not explicitly, revolved around the scarcity and high value of the substance, with governments clearly feeling entitled to a share of the profits traders make on these expensive items. Such with the justification of salt tax, paper excise, and even advertisement duty have been. Window tax and bedroom tax. The window tax was introduced after controversy arose around the introduction of income tax, which was considered to be a breach of privacy. The rationale behind this was that the grandeur of a person's house, and hence the number of windows, was a visible sign of their wealth, which could, furthermore, not be hidden like income can. One way people got around this problem was to brick up their windows. In the case of poor people this was a big social problem, as they would often force themselves to live in the dark in order to avoid paying this tax. The UK's Welfare Reform Act 2012 contains a clause referred to as an under-occupancy penalty. The penalty is aimed at people on welfare benefits who live in houses containing more bedrooms than they need. While not officially referred to as a tax, the controversial policy is instead billed as a way to free up more living space for overcrowded families, but has nevertheless been widely dubbed a bedroom tax, and has led to comparisons to the 17th century window tax. While originally unofficial, the term gained wide acceptance even before it came into force in April 2013. Even being used by public organizations. Further controversy was raised when it emerged that pedophiles and rapists will be exempt from the tax, the loophole arising from the fact that they are not allowed to rent out rooms. Newspapers and advertising a knowledge tax. Newspapers were taxed in the United Kingdom from 1712 until 1853. The original tax was increased with the 1814 Stamp Act, when it was stipulated at 4d per copy. Since this made it extremely expensive for working-class families, it was pejoratively referred to as a tax on knowledge, with people forced to rent newspapers on a per-hour basis, or else pull money together in order to buy and share. This resulted in a situation where even out-of-date newspapers were widely sought after. Advertisement duty was also stipulated in the same laws and was also charged on a per-unit basis, irrespective of the size or nature of the advertisement. Until 1833 the cost was 3/6d, after which it was reduced to 1/6d. Examples: Canada. Both the federal and provincial governments impose excise taxes on inelastic goods such as cigarettes, gasoline, alcohol, and for vehicle air conditioners. A great bulk of the retail price of cigarettes and alcohol are excise taxes. The vehicle air conditioner tax is currently set at $100 per air conditioning unit. Canada has some of the highest rates of taxes on cigarettes and alcohol in the world. These are sometimes referred to as sin taxes. United States. An excise is a tax upon manufacture, sale or for a business license or charter, according to Law.com's legal dictionary, and is to be distinguished from a tax on real property, income or estates. In the United States, the term excise means any tax other than a property tax or capitation, or a tax that is simply called an excise in the language of the statute imposing that tax. An excise under definition is not necessarily the same as an excise under definition. Both the federal and state governments levy excise taxes on goods such as alcohol, motor fuel, and tobacco products. And the federal and some state governments lay an excise on the exercise of federal privilege, most widely known as the income tax. Even though federal excise taxes are geographically uniform, state excise taxes vary considerably. However, taxation constitutes a substantial proportion of the retail prices on alcohol and tobacco products. Local governments may also impose an excise tax. For example, the city of Anchorage, Alaska charges a cigarette tax of $1.30 per pack, which is on top of the federal excise tax and the state excise tax. In 2011, the United States federal excise tax on gasoline was 18.4 cents per gallon and 24.4 cents per gallon for diesel fuel. United Kingdom. Her Majesty's Customs and Excise was, until April 2005, a department of the British government in the UK. It was responsible for the collection of value-added tax, customs duties, excise duties, and other indirect taxes such as air passenger duty, climate change levy, insurance premium tax, landfill tax and aggregates levy. It was also responsible for managing the import and export of goods and services into the UK. HMC was merged with the Inland Revenue to form a new department, HM Revenue and Customs, with effect from April 18, 2005. The tax was first implemented in the UK under this name in the mid-17th century. India. In India, almost all manufactured products are included for excise duty. In India, forgetting excise tax, GOVT, of India has made automation of central excise and service tax. With this, manufacturer can easily pay their excise tax online on every 5th of following the month through GAR7. Germany charges the following excise taxes: energy, gasoline 65.45 carats per litre, diesel, 47.04 carats per litre, LPG, 16.6 carats per kilogram, CNG, 18.03 carats per kilogram, heating oil, 13.00 carats per kilogram. Electricity, default 2.05 carats per kilowatt-hour, for trains, trams, etc. 1.142 carats per kilowatt-hour. Nuclear fuel, 145/G. Intermediate products in production of alcoholic beverages, default 1.53/L, alcoholic contents less than 15% 1.02/L, intermediate products in champagne production, 1.36/L. Tobacco, cigarettes 9.44 carats cigarette plus 21.8% of the gross price, pipe tobacco, 15.66/kg plus 13.13% of the gross price, cigars, 1.4 carats cigar plus 1.47% of the gross price. Coffee, roasted 2.19/kg, instant, 4.78/kg. Beer, c. 9.4 carats per litre, depends on the type of beer, spirits, champagne, alcoholic contents less than 6% 0.51 L, alcoholic contents greater than or equal to 6% 1.36 L. Alcopops, 0.0555 L. Pure alcohol, machinery of implementation. An excise duty is applied by the affixation of revenue stamps to the products being sold. In the case of tobacco or alcohol, for example, the producer buys a certain bulk amount of excise stamps from the government and is then obliged to affix one to every packet of cigarettes or bottle of spirits produced. A government-owned alcohol monopoly is another way to ensure payment of the taxes. Criticisms. Critics of excise tax have interpreted and described excise duty as simply a government's way of levying further and unnecessary taxation on the population. The presence of refunds of duty under the UK's list of excisable activities has been used to support this argument, as it results in taxation being implemented on persons even where they would normally be exempt from paying other types of taxes hence why they are getting the refund in the first place. Furthermore, excise is often somewhat similar to other taxes and sometimes doubles up with them, or as in the case of customs duties, since the two taxes largely apply to the same types of goods, people are forced to pay tax twice over on the same items, once through excise upon purchase and a second time around through customs duties upon transportation. Taxation on medicines, pharmaceuticals and medical equipment has been an issue of contention, especially in developing countries, due to the fact that this tax can result in inflated prices of ordinary and even potentially life-saving medication, as well as raise the cost of medical procedures, sometimes forcing healthcare providers to limit the number of operations performed. As far as illegal drugs are concerned, it has also been argued that, by taxing banned substances, some U.S. states are able to gain revenues, while the legislation protects the anonymity of the dealers. A dealer is not required to give his/her name or address when purchasing stamps, and the department is prohibited from sharing any information relating to the purchase of drug tax stamps with law enforcement or anyone else. See also, Customs, Securities Turnover Excise Tax, References.